morning, everyone. Bon dia, bonjour, guten Tag, Sao Xing Hao. Welcome, and now Maurice Dos will take over the program for this morning. Thank you, Maurice.
Good morning. Bon dia. When I discovered Vita Heinrich and Darcia Narvaez's presentations, I felt that it would be somehow an interesting mental gymnastic for me to try, because I thought I would have to read their papers, know all about it, and bond both. But their theme are so different that I thought I had, and I Googled that word, do the splits, like this, which I can't really very well. I never could, but today is worse, to try to help with the dialogue between two wonderful, interesting ladies who have such different themes. Then I arrived here, and I realized that unfortunately, Darcia Narvaez won't be here because she is ill and she just couldn't. So I thought, okay, that's another one. And I wondered how I would do with that. But Darcia is apparently an excellent, wonderful professional, and she sent her PowerPoint to us. And I looked at it, and in the PowerPoint, she's talking. So the technique team worked pretty much, and we will be able to look at the PowerPoint and listen to her. And maybe, it's not sure yet, they will have to see if it works or not, we will be able to hear her really, meaning that she will wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, because she's in Indiana, United States, in order to talk with us after the PowerPoint. And then I thought, maybe is this the beginning of this new year, you say that, year, period, of virtual meetings. So we begin today. So now I would like to introduce Vita Heinrich. Vita is doctor in psychology in Germany. She is a bioenergetic therapist, supervisor, and international trainer for long years. And she trains in Germany, Poland, Russia, Scandinavia, sometimes New Zealand, and maybe am I forgetting some other places. She is quite an active woman at the IIBA. She is at the origin of the publication of the handbook, which is this summary of lots of articles which have been translated into German, Italian, French, and I don't know about Spanish and Portuguese. Portuguese also? So you still have to do it. And hopefully will be translated into Chinese and Russian one of these days. Vita is a horse rider, and she's passionate by that. And she taught us in the faculty meetings to use very nice metaphors and mentioning horses' behavior to illustrate some of her thoughts. So we'll keep this in. So I'm happy to introduce her, who will talk this morning about encountering the shadow, working with negativity in the therapeutic process. Vita.
Thank you, Maurice. That was really nice just to mention my horses. I feel like a horse now who wants to go out and same time, of course, a bit afraid. And one could say it's a home turf here for me, but this is I think, a difficult thing because not every home was safe, or my home wasn't safe. So for me, it would be easier to talk in front of maybe 300 Catholic marriage counselors. That would be easier than to speak at home or feel at home while speaking. And maybe to illustrate this first before I start with the introjects, I will let you know about my good and my bad introject, which is coming up if I'm trying to feel at home. The bad one was my father. When I was 17, he was telling me with tears in his eyes, if the whole world would think like you are thinking, then the world would be very bad. So be aware of my concepts here. The other, my grandfather, who was able to feed me with the bottle when my mother was absent in the first weeks of my life. So it's a good introject. This grandfather always teased me. He said, when I became a schoolgirl, you will once become so intelligent that you could smell the shit of the cat in the darkness. And this is about more of this here, about smelling the shit of the cat in the darkness, maybe. And I will give you some serious concepts, and same time, I think some little pieces for having fun, or for having a funny perspective on these serious concepts. Okay, so since I'm not a native speaker and I won't be able to remember all those words the translators gave to me, so I will read my paper. I will use, of course, not every time his and her and she and he. I decided just for one pronoun, which is he, because I'm friend of male persons too. And so I decided for clothes like black and white because of the issue, not because I'm so innocent. Okay, so I called it Connecting Authentically with Ourselves and Others, and gave impact to the expression, to that part of bioenergetic work we are used to, but often seen as too loud or too. And so it's about expressive work with the vocal expression, the voice. On the way to authenticity, we are challenged to deal with our negative introjects. We heard yesterday about paranoia. We heard Gary telling us something about the otherness. And I would like to give a glance or some ideas for clinical work with the shadows, clinical work with what is hindering us to just receive the sympathy or to be aware of the otherness, and how to deal with it in a clinical setting. So we have to deal with our negative introjects and energizing them, giving them a motoric and vocal expression. The appreciation of our aggressive impulses, even those of resentment, give us a chance to remain in contact with ourselves and others in a constructive manner. I'm going to illustrate vocally expressive ways of dealing with the hostility bound in the introject. Therapeutic techniques which give a chance to embrace and energize the own shadow. So I'm talking now a bit about those concepts, the negative introjects, the shadows, the split of aggression, destructive aggression. The inhibition of life-affirming natural aggression leads to destruction. Hence, the suppressed split of aggression comes back indirectly and the more intensely with Kernberg, as it is said in Germany, so maybe you say Kernberg, wrote about the negative introjects that they appear as unconscious, seemingly destructive relationship patterns in contact with oneself and to others. And they are persistent. And that's the thing we have to deal with in therapy. So they are often updated and compulsively repeated in sensations, feelings, thoughts, images, and acts. We as the body psychotherapeutic approach, we think even more the negative introjects and likewise the positive ones are anchored, incorporated, implanted in the body, and therefore remain persistent in their impact on relationships. So that's more our perspective. I think it's broader than Kernberg or Kernberg. The introjects are anchored, incorporated, implanted in the body and remain persistent. And so, hoo-hoo. That's funny. So negative introjects developed during our childhood and youth as an outcome of strong destructive actions, verbal violence, and careless or malicious omissions by the parents. Our dark sides developed to protect ourselves from the threatening experiences in our original family. Since, as children, we do everything for our parents to be loved. We love, imitate, and internalize those who mistreat us. Unfortunately, that leads to introjection of the unconscious demoniac attitude of the parent who threatened us. Nearer? Like this? Okay, better. So, it comes from the violation of physical or mental boundaries, like strokes, forced feeding, sexual abuse, lack of assistance and support with traumatizing consequences. Or on a verbal level, like depreciation, humiliation, sadistic behavior, and these can be glances, words, touches, or omission of touches. Basically, these are the kind of violation of boundaries which interrupt or prevent the self-regulation of the organism in reference to sleep, eating, sexuality, movement, body care, contact, and play. The desire for attachment and the fear of autonomy often led us to dread the expression of fury and self-assertion. We direct the protest and hatred into our inner self as not to be rejected and left by people. We fear our own inner impulses to use violence, even if we okay, the shadow is coming. Oh. Shall I go on? No.
If you dare, go on.
What?
If you dare.
Yes, for me it's light. So I'm talking out of the darkness. Even if we oppose depreciation and strictness of our parents during our youth, that doesn't mean that we can avoid our tendency to self-hate and self-depreciation by sheer conscious decision. Many of us are frightened by the power of these unconscious parts of ourselves and deny their existence. The rejection is often projected, as we heard yesterday about paranoia, the rejection is often projected towards the counterpart who is considered as threatening. That counterpart can also be the therapist. So, next. We have then this victim-perpetrator game, the dynamic of the shadows in the therapeutic relationship. So, the therapist being the good one or trying to be the good one, doing his or her best, then getting angry at the patient's introject, or helpless, or both. So that's what we have to deal with. Most clients and many therapists, I say most clients, many therapists, so we can discuss this later, have dark sides. Many faculty members, maybe, which they do not perceive as such. They unconsciously affect the therapeutic relationship. The less a therapist knows about his own dark sides, the less can he discover those in his clients. Sheer affirmative attitude can only help in a limited way. Self and external contemptuous introjects are often dynamite in the therapeutic process and likely to be the cause for ending the relationship. I quote a Jungian analyst from Switzerland, it's Verena Kast. She is saying, also those who make themselves victims appear more aggressive in a powerless refusal. And no aggression is more destructive than the aggression of those who have been victims for too long. That's an analytic perspective. It fits with ours. The therapist needs to be aware of the aggression, but easily becomes victim, slides into the role of the attacker or the offender. Kernberg takes this even further when he writes, the therapist doesn't need only to be able to identify himself with the commander of a concentration camp, with the torturer of a dictatorship, with the sexual emotions of an incestuous father or a sadistic mother. He also needs to feel pleasure to destroy, to throw a bomb. So we know we are not per se safe in the situation with client and therapist in one room. Sometimes we need to focus the negativity before getting nearer to safety. So since the negative introjects are anchored in the body, we perceive these often only as complementary countertransference. So what helps in confronting the disgustful introject? My statement is sounds can definitely help to energize introjects. So I have been fascinated by that topic for a long time, and I would like to share with you my enthusiasm for fascinating functional anatomic coherences in vocal expression of ache and sorrow, unwillingness, the lust in choking and contempt. That is, I'm dealing with the oral segment, the oral and pharyngeal area, and the non-verbal possibilities of expressing negativity. I myself have been inspired by Ben Shapiro and years of experience with the creative work. He activates the voice and plays with the pleasure to stick out one's tongue. Before having had years of experiences with Bob Lewis, who is here, trying to get me out of my cephalic shock and overall narcissistic denial of all my hurts, I found unheard sounds. So that's the background for that. I was looking for an explanation for the significance of the tongue as a communicative organ in the bioenergetic work with negativity, and I found one. First, our chancellor. So I decided not to show pictures of patients or to. So I work with pictures of people who are in public and are in the web. So I started to read the old teachers when exploring physical expression of unwillingness, disgust, reluctance. So I started with Charles Darwin. He wrote a book, The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals, at the end of the 19th century. And of course, I read Wilhelm Reich and Alexander Lowen, and how they are describing the anatomic structure which helps us to understand the physical emotional suppression or expression of disgust and negativity. I was interested in how Darwin describes the universal non-verbal expression of contempt, mockery, revulsion, unpleasure, disgust, and disdain. I quote some of his sayings or statements. It was 1872 or 8. So he said, because the feeling of revulsion originally emerges connected to the act of eating and tasting, it is natural that the forms of expression for the act itself mainly exist in the movements around the mouth. Thrusting out the tongue to let a despicable object fall out of the mouth should explain why sticking out the tongue is commonly known as a sign of contempt or hatred. That's Darwin, 1870. Extreme revulsion is expressed by movements around the mouth, which are identical to those preparing for the act of vomiting. Mouth and nose have a part in the expression. The connection to olfaction and sense of taste play a part or a role when wrinkling one's nose, blowing out with the mouth and saying poo, never. So I show the next picture. It's all so thank you. You know, the haka ritual of the Maori in preparation for a fight contains many of those gestures and vocal expressions. Wilhelm Reich, 1942, described these as functionally taking part in the emotional expression, respectively in the blocking of the same. So the ocular segment, the oral segment, the throat segment. The first three segments Reich was describing are taking part in the expression of disgust and of unwillingness or contempt. And so if we are blocked there or able to express that way, we have to use these muscles or functions of these segments. Oh, they are interconnected. So I come to that later. The jaw plays an important role in controlling emotions. Also, the deep muscles of the throat, and now the word sternocleidomastoid, and scalenus muscles, when trying to suppress crying or anger. So I have, you see the scalenus muscles here, for those who are not knowing where they are. Alexander Lowen emphasized, like Reich, the gag reflex and the vocal expression of anger, crying, unwillingness as important for softening the blocks. Reich and Lowen preferred hand-on techniques. Reich wrote, "The best way to disturb the choking of emotions is the triggering of the gag reflex. Is the gag reflex working, or is it even working to make the ill person vomiting? So the emotions which are blocked by the neck armor are free." I myself am each time taking home the throw-up paper bags of airlines I'm flying with, just for the case a client comes to that point. But usually, I don't work like this. My experience is that the vomiting impulse is decreasing if we work on vocal expression of the negative impulses while facing each other. So if I'm going here to speak about energetic, somatic, bottom-up processes, it will not be in this concrete sense, but in a neurobiological sense. So I come to the point how to reach authenticity by work with sounds, or connecting with ourselves and others by sounds. Sounds are the voice of the body. Sounds help us to open the throat and to dissolve pain. Crying, mourning, and sighing relax the muscles. It is also a proven fact that laughing patients require fewer painkillers. Same for therapists. Whereas dissociated and suppressed emotions silence us and lead us away from the reality of our body and from contact with others. The sound of our voice offers a more genuine form of self-expression than our speech, which is controlled by the left hemisphere of our brain. Sounds are linked to the right hemisphere and the implicit memory. Working with sounds can give access to what we call true body self. We have learned to free the voice in bioenergetics by spontaneous sounds in order to better express our suppressed, dissociated emotions, in order to relax muscles, and getting access to our body memories. But simply encouraging clients to just let the voice come is not enough, since frequently it doesn't come at all. However, it's not always that easy to develop an expression that is spontaneous and comes from our true self. So, what I'm then discovering all these last years is to help patients with images of the evil. So, I tell it now. So, most inspiring for me was the figure Gollum or Smeagol in Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, and the vocalization by the British actor Andy Serkis. So the Gollum has only, I think, 5 or 7 teeth and 7 hairs. And Andy Serkis is the one who gave his voice to that figure in Lord of the Rings. So this is the British actor Andy Serkis. Tolkien created an ambivalent creature split into pitiful ache and sorrow, as well as repulsive villainy. The figure inspired me for my work with vocal expression of evilness, meanness, outrage, aching, sorrow, disgust, contempt, groveling, pitiful behavior. He is a symbol of the shadow of a split personality. He is known to everybody and equipped with all possible ugliness in physiognomy and voice. Gollum whistles, spits, screeches, whimpers, whines, rumbles, shrieks, sobs, sniffs, makes discordant hissing sounds like a curse. He was given the name Gollum because he makes choking and smacking noises sounding like Gollum when experiencing sorrow or states of outrage. He talks to himself in the third person. He says, "We are so lonely," and names himself my precious. Andy Serkis says in an interview that he dealt intensively with the personality of Gollum and searched for a voice quality which was able to express Gollum's anguish. In this process, he focused on the noises which should come from its throat or pharynx. Serkis accidentally got inspired by one of his cats when looking for a quality of the voice for this figure, and the cat was regurgitating a casting in front of his eyes, and so he saw this movement which was going from it was going the spine down and up, and it was like this. And so he was inspired by his cat to give this Gollum figure the voice in Lord of the Rings. The Gollum himself stands for the upheld split of victim and perpetrator, and the blocked energy in the voice. It does not cry openly. Neither does it stick out the tongue, nor does it disgorge anything. It gives us a good idea for the bioenergetic work with physically blocked destructive aggression, as well as the understanding of perpetrator-victim dynamics. Now, we will have a chance, I hope, to first see a short video wherein Andy Serkis is talking to Twitter news from Donald Trump in that voice.
And of course, the performance that people first got to know you was as Smeagol, a Gollum. Absolutely. Tremendous. Not only are you doing that, but you're doing 2 different characters, you might say, 2 different sides. I wonder if I could ask you a favor.
Yes.
Is that I have here, where do I have it? I have it right here. I would love it if I could hear either Smeagol or Golem
Okay. Or both.
read these tweets by Donald Trump. Would that be? Would you be? It's also in there. If you want to do it up here, it's also in there. Whatever you want to do. Yeah.
The fake news media has never been so wrong or so dirty. Purposely incorrect stories and phony sources to meet their agenda of hate. Sad.
Just for the lose this one. Just that one. Give it a moment.
Despite the constant negative press kerfuffle. Wait, what's kerfuffle, Precious?
No one knows. That's the most beautiful thing. I gotta say,
Okay.
they actually sound better that way.
Oh, so one more. The next is a parody on Theresa May about the Brexit, and it's about the two parts of in Theresa May's personality. And Andy Serkis is playing her, so he has red nails and he has this hair, and he's playing Theresa May. So look.
Prime Minister, we wanted a copy of your withdrawal agreement.
Our agreement. This is it. Our deal. Yes. We takes back control. Money. Borders. Laws. Blue passports. No. It hurts the people. It makes them poorer. But I finds it. I negotiates it. We want it. We has to do it. Okay? We asks the people if they want it. And no! Stupid, tricksy Remainers. They ruins it. But if the people want something else, then false. This is the only deal. Juicy and sweet. We want it. We need it. We will have it. But they told us, Precious. They hates the deal. All of them hates it. They want a people's vote. People's vote? They steal it from us. Curse them, we hate them. The peoples are our friends. You don't have any friends.
Oh my God. So, I mean, on one hand, I could stop here, but I will go on. So, in my next life, I will become an actor. So I was interested in how these phenomena and functional coherences of negativity can be explained anatomically, the functional aspects of vocal expression. So tension in the short muscles of the neck or in the muscles of the jaw will, like this? Good. Will cause reactively tension in the front part of the throat. You know this as bioenergetic colleagues, you know about this. You know, so we all learn about the scalenus muscles and the sternocleidomastoid, and we see with Theresa May how the scalenus muscles are tensed. And I put that Gollum picture aside because in his expression it's more like he could cry, but his scalenus muscles are as tensed as hers. And when we look longer into that, we see that maybe if Theresa May could cry, the Brexit would have been decided already. So all kinds of expression concerning lust and unpleasure and are connected to the pharyngeal width or narrowness. When Andy Serkis searched for a voice for the figure Gollum, he looked closely at the pharynx and the throat to identify a place for the expression of hold or held pain in the body. So he went directly with his attention to that part of the body, and his cat helped him. But he was then here when he brought this onto stage, or when he played the Gollum, and his anguish, his held pain, held anger, the negativity, the victim-perpetrator dynamic. The sympathetic nervous system, which is causing fight and flight reactions, has a direct connection to the short neck muscles. It stiffens these muscles in situations of stress, anger, or fear. In this context, it's important to know, it's for you, I know, that the psoas is reflexively connected with the opposing head turner, with the sternocleidomastoid. It's, you know, something like that. Yeah, we can work on the psoas, of course, but that would mean in this context no solution for the bound aggression in the introjects in terms of psychodynamics. You know, so that's a little bit of bothering with Stephen Porges now. How negative and positive primary emotions affect the vocal and the auditory perception and mimic can be explained by Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, of course. So we just have to focus. Being in socially safe situations with a high tone of the ventral vagal complex, a human being can show friendly facial expression, make eye contact, express himself in a pleasing voice. The social hearing of language is improved because the auditory tube, the eustachische Röhre, we say in German, Eustachian tube, is opened. The pharyngeal width, the parasympathetic innervation of it, is connected to emotions of lust, of happiness, and develops while laughing, enjoying gorgeous meals or pleasant situations. So that's a German football trainer, and I think he has won a game. So this is with pharyngeal width weiter. In an external or inner threatening situation, the tone of the ventral vagal complex decreases with the aim to support fight or flight and to limit social behavior. The sound of the human voice is perceived more slurred. The voice loses its ability of modulation. The mimic impoverishes and changes in a negative sense in the expression are happening, so the eyelids hang down. The pharyngeal narrowness by this sympathetic innervation accompanies emotions like grief, anger, and crying, somatic complaints. When suppressing emotional expression, the variability of the voice is limited. So I put this then just to see again, so it's the dropping of the eyelids and this kind of, I don't know to say how this is called here. It's what our chancellor has also. And he is disappointed. So he is disappointed, of course. How many time do I have? Time. So the spastic contraction of the neck segment integrates the tongue. That happens when swallowing, crying, and anger. Reich did point out that already in 1942. He said the muscles of the tongue are fixed essentially at the bones of the cervical vertebrae. So he had an idea of the connection. He gave an important hint to the functional connection of the tongue with the muscles of the cranial base and the spine, thus to the ocular segment and the softening of the eye block if we work with throat, tongue. Then we lose or soften the ocular blockage because of these coherences and interfunctions. But later I will tell you the lingual bone, or the bone behind below the tongue, the os hyoideum, is not connected to the rest of the skeleton. It is rather fixed between the cranial base and the base of the mouth on the one hand, and on the other hand, on the sternum through muscles and ligaments. So the lingual bone and the larynx are connected to a functional unit through a muscular fascial membrane. So I think you will have a chance to read this next year in the journal because it's maybe complicated. So these constrictor muscles in the pharyngeal area are fixed at the back of the skeleton part of the cranial base and in the front at the hyoid and the larynx. So there's a connective tissue. There's not a direct connection, but that explains something. So I come to that point, bioenergetic vocal expressive work with negativity. For example, the stimulation of the mimic and vocal expression of the village idiot with sticking out the tongue is a suitable energizing means for narcissistic structures. it clears one's mind, reduces the habit, I know it all, and the arrogance, respectively, the poor victim attitude. We were using the sticking out of the tongue during the process of therapy intuitively all the years in order to express maybe disgust and unwillingness. So far, I had no explanation for that. Why did it work that way? I didn't know about the anatomic coherences as far as the efficacy is concerned of that work. And I didn't get an explanation from Ben Shapiro, who is not interested in reading books. So he just did it. For example, with masochistic clients, we can commonly see that all our seemingly constructive suggestions fail. We experience sadistic impulses in the embodied countertransference. We can smell the negativity. So first we have to welcome our countertransference and transform it into an offer to the client by asking him or her to take up an energetic position with the negativity. For instance, if a client is able to tell me with a smirk he can barely hide, I like to confuse you and to checkmate you, and then he is fully aware of the sadistic part of his aggression, then we can be happy. I am happy, then I appreciate it. So the figure Gollum offers a creepy, refreshing potential for unblocking these first three segments of Reich, and same time working on a dynamic level, a psychodynamic level, with the introjects, with the both parts, the victim and the perpetrator, and with the poor and the mean figure. So what I do is I suggest to clients who are internally occupied with disgust and unwillingness and blocked regarding the expression of these emotions, to first use the image of Tolkien's Gollum. I ask them to think of the viciousness and wickedness as well as the submissive ache and sorrow of this figure, as we saw in Theresa May's in the parody. So the switch between both innocent. And thus to activate the voice for both parts inside. And if the clients then, in a second step, express their disgust with sticking out their tongues and making pharyngeal noises, it quickly shows an emotional and physical solution. That can be done, or this can be done, in the grounded bent over position, or in the arc, or while kicking on the mattress. When I experienced this for over years now, during trainings or with patients, how this worked intuitively first, and then with my questions and my focus more precise, I was interested or was guided by those questions like, why, for example, does the neck of a masochistic person stretch as a consequence after sticking the tongue out? Why did looking in other human eyes become easier? The projections of the own negativity concerning the glances of others were reduced. The eye blocks softer. Why did the breathing intensify simultaneously? Why did the voice become freer and multivariant? So, how much time? 10 minutes? Okay. I think I will omit something. Okay. Let's see. So, I give you these pictures about the offender, the attacking, the hidden offender, the hidden attacking part of the person, the meanness, you know? I'm sweating like hell. Yes. And let's see. So I have some statements again. So my summary is, while the client is activating the tongue and producing pharyngeal sounds, which express unwillingness, we got a true self-expression. Inhibited, embodied relational statements with destructive impulses are revealed and same time reduced. This would not happen only through speaking that is controlled by the left hemisphere, of course. The game of behaving in a superior or inferior manner ends. The compulsive need to act the shadow out stops. It is an escape from the fake self, the narcissistic exterior, and allows a person to behave in a more authentic way. And in that, vocal expression plays an important role. We can expressively work with it in order to develop more authenticity in contact with ourselves and others. And that requires courage and humor from the therapist as well as the client. So So what I prepared, what is too much now, I think. I prepared something which I'm doing then, continuing after having worked on a body level. I ask the patients to work on their inner negative pictures at home, and with the principle of externalization. So I first say the summary of the tongue out thing is expressive vocal motoric work with resentment and negativity leads to erection of the cervical spine, extension of the neck, reduction of the eye block, better hearing. Okay. And the interventions I'm using, beside the bioenergetic body work in the praxis, I asked for homework. And this is about externalization of the destructive personal parts. It's object shaping and preparing a funeral. So, and I will read something from a patient who did this. She had a story of incest with her father, and she was driven by pictures of seeing him again and again and again, having him in her mind, in her body, and could not get rid of hate and self-depreciation. It was in her body. So we worked, of course, bodily, but I asked her to do the homework and to do sculpture an object, to externalize the hated father, and tell me how she would like to bury, what kind of funeral. So I'm then asking, what kind of element is for you a good thing for a funeral? Is it water? Is it earth? Is it fire? Or the air? These are the 4 elements men are using for funerals all over the world. So, and most patients are able to answer spontaneously. They have a favorite. So this patient had fire. So I read what she wrote to me then. It was an email I got in Brazil when we had the conference. She did the ritual when I was absent for 3 weeks. She wrote, In the meantime, I have created an object of aggression. It was a real challenge, and the result was a figure basically life-sized with a penis made from stuffed pink sock. Smile, smile, she had in her mail. Your suggestion came to fruition. It didn't take long to take my aggression out on this doll. The actual challenging process was that I gave myself permission to create it, and therefore to have a specific opposite to see, to feel, and to act out my aggression bound in an object. And he experienced his transformation on Saturday evening in the stone pit during a fire ritual with sage, lavender, burial clothes, candles, and singing. When he was almost completely burned, people came by, although it was already pitch black, 10 p.m. My partner was with me, although he really was worried that someone would complain to the police if he saw us because of burning hazardous waste, since the object was made from pillow fillings, tape, garbage bags, and acrylic film mass. It really was adventurous, and I'm happy and relieved to have accomplished that. More of that in our next lesson, she said. So, and it's enough, huh? So I would shorten it now. So, what I would like to say about the golem and the solutions. What I state is, of course, we can integrate a social communicative organ like the tongue in the work with shadows and introjects, of course. If now the golem could stick out his tongue, show his contempt openly, and could vomit or express his craving, he wouldn't be a split character. That's my statement. Precisely this bound aggression in the figure of Gollum is causing the alternating embodiment of the ache and sorrow, the victim role, and the viciousness offender role. So switching back and forth from one to the another part and not having a solution is due to his blocked throat and being so alone, of course, because he's talking to himself in the third person. We are so lonely, my precious, he says. So the failed integration of his person is evident, and he presents himself as an unsexual being. His voice shows the fixation of the aggression in the blocking of the tongue and the pharynx, like open crying is blocked, as with Theresa May, of course. The golem utters a fulminant scream at the end of the movie when falling into the magma of the fire cave and dying. In life, he couldn't free himself with sound. So, thank you.
Before the other ones, but we put our tongues out and scream.
Yes, I will tell them that they do that in the affinity group.
Right
now. Danke. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. And I felt all the time this focus and attention, so I'm really happy that did it.
Bravo.
Oh, bravo.